Okay, I don't see it yet. I don't see it live yet. Okay, I believe now we are live. Just double check on the page. All right, so I do believe it is working now. So good morning. Good morning, Magda. Good morning, everybody who's joining us. Just sorry while the technical issues, as always, just double checking things. All right, so good morning. My name is Berak Hussain. I'm a therapist or a counselor at the Health and Counselling Services at the University of Ottawa, and through the CU Health Promotion page, we are doing live workshops, live webinars, interactive ones, whatever you'd like to call them. Ever since all of our services have gone virtual, we've also decided to do some virtual interactive workshops for our students and whoever else would like to join, just as a way of connecting and staying in contact and having healthy interactions, especially during this time, so that we don't feel as isolated. And the discussion we're going to have this morning is taking a look at mindfulness, which is a practice that is much needed these days. And my colleague from the Health and Counselling Services joining us, Magda Georgescu, she herself has a master's of social work and is an amazing colleague and fun to chat with and talk and learn with. And so she's joining us this morning with that. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce my colleague Magda, and she's going to tell a little bit more about her background while I fix some tech stuff here. Go for it.
Okay, good morning, Berak. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for having me. So Berak said, my name is Magda Georgescu. I am one of the counselors working in the Health and Counselling Clinic. I'm doing individual sessions, and just recently I brought the group of mindfulness for emotional regulation at the clinic, to which we had a great response. We ran it twice. So when Berak came with the idea of doing a live webinar on mindfulness, I responded with lots of emotions, of course. So we are gonna probably learn a little bit today about how to deal with our emotions with mindfulness, with one of the tools that is so great to learn about mindfulness.
Absolutely, and it's a useful thing to understand, not just from a therapeutic point of view, like in sessions, but also everyday lives. And so it's good to have a basic understanding of it, which is, and so we've actually had some questions from people who joined in terms of sending their questions ahead of time. And for those of you who are watching, please do send in your questions as well as we're watching. So first question is, what is mindfulness? And can you describe it in a few words, or however words that you see fit? Again, while I'm still trying to figure this out.
Okay. So there are many ways to define mindfulness, but it's important to find a definition that makes sense to each of us. To me, the way I describe mindfulness is the act of intentionally bringing awareness to the present moment and allowing ourselves to experience our emotions, thoughts, physical sensations, and surroundings with no blame or judgment. Mindfulness is also a practice. So mindfulness is important, and I cannot stress this enough. Mindfulness is a practice. So mindfulness is not one-time deal, and is not a quick fix to any of our problems. So there is no substitute for practice when it comes to mindfulness. So if we want to become mindful and to experience the benefits of mindfulness, we really need to practice.
And so can you tell us a little bit more about what does this practice mean? Like, how does this impact us on a mental and physical level?
So mindfulness has been researched extensively in the last 10 to 15 years, probably a bit longer. And it really proved to have both physical and emotionally benefits, especially for our students. I just selected a few to talk about because they are relevant to our students, to our population. So one of the benefits of practicing mindfulness is that we can obtain more control over our minds. So naturally, most of the time we are living either in the past, reliving things that have happened to us, or in the future, worrying about things that might happen. And unfortunately, living either in the past or in the future is associated with unpleasant emotions. You know, when you are in the past, you might experience sadness, regret, shame, remorse. And when you are in the future, you feel more anxious and out of control. So through mindfulness practice, we learn to work with our minds rather than, live controlled by our minds. So just being aware, just bringing that awareness in the present moment, and being aware that our minds take us either in the past or in the future, we can decide if we want or not to be there.
So it's a matter of learning how to manage your thoughts and being able to have a way of controlling the thoughts.
It's a way of becoming an observer of whatever happens to you, either it's physical sensations, thoughts, or emotions. Yeah. So another benefit of practicing mindfulness is that improves our ability to regulate emotions. So, and I want to spend a bit of time to talk about that because it's a topic that is researched a lot in psychology, and is one of the most important skills to have us in adult life. So emotion regulation is the ability to modulate our emotions, to either increase or decrease our emotions as needed. So it's to have that ability, we really need to know and to understand what we are feeling and what to do about it in any given situation. So to regulate our emotions in any environment, we need to recognize, to monitor, and to adjust our emotions according to the situation we are in. So how can mindfulness be helpful in that? It is because in mindfulness, we bring awareness to the only one thing that we do in the moment or we feel in the moment. So when we deal with emotions one at a time, that prevents emotional overload.
Exactly. And especially you could imagine during this time, during the pandemic, we probably didn't think much about it about 6 weeks ago now. We didn't think much about it. And then we heard there was a case in Ottawa. And I think our minds went into overload of panic and fear. And that's when people started bulk buying, including toilet paper. And we saw that. And then the next day we heard that schools were shut down and March break is going to be extended, et cetera, et cetera. And now everything after that just quickly took on a life of its own. I can imagine how that impacted our students and just people in the general public, how overwhelming that must have felt. And so we were all in a state of anxiety and panic in the beginning. And I think we've regulated that over time.
We were, all of us were in the future being anxious
Exactly.
and worries. Yeah. So indeed, we came to live our worries, unfortunately, through the pandemic. Yeah. But in that moment, back then, when we started to worry, we weren't there yet. Yeah. So unfortunately, we lived anxiety just thinking about the future, and now we are living through the situation.
And that's the thing is we were looking at what happened to the other countries and looking at their social media, their media outlets, which is a big mistake in terms of trying to learn what's going on. You always want to go to the official health officials, which gives you more of a grounded guideline, but then the media sensationalizes, social media sensationalizes. And so we were looking through that lens of what's going to happen to us here in our city through what's happening around the world. And like you said, we were living our worries, which is why we responded this way with that panic and bulk bought and started fearing what's going to happen to us and our families, which is very valid. And I would say it's very normal to experience that.
It is a normal response. Yeah? But through mindfulness, if we just focus on our emotions and we just acknowledge, validate, and create a bit of space for our emotions, then we do not live led by our emotions. We know
That's
how
the
to
key word,
respond.
led by our emotions, keywords. Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
Okay. Do you have
go ahead.
anything to add to that?
No, I think
I will go ahead and talk about, another benefit of mindfulness, which is increasing behavioral control.
please
So
go for it.
probably, yeah, we do have in our caseload, I'm pretty sure you met lots of students who are coming and say, I did something that I don't like. When I think back to it, I lashed out at my roommates and I'm not really proud of that, or I yelled, or I get very wound up and I don't know exactly how to respond. So I really want to improve that. So in mindfulness, we become aware of our emotions and thoughts more quickly. If we practice, the more we practice, the more quickly we get to notice our emotions and thoughts, which gives us time to choose how to respond to unwanted urges, because emotions have urges. And if we act upon our urges, we might respond in a way, we might react. So we want not to react, but to choose carefully the response to our emotions. So regular practice of mindfulness diminish the automatic behavior and help us habituate into new behaviors, more desirable, more preferable behaviors.
And that's really interesting because, again, in the moment of high emotions, our amygdala inside our brain is just going like this, flashing. And so when you have those emotions in full gear like that, it is really hard to observe your thoughts and lower the intensity of the emotions involved with those thoughts in order to respond in a healthy way, whether it's anger, whether it's frustration, and whatever it is, especially as students in the moment, whether it's the frustration of trying to get all your information packed in for an exam, or what's going to happen to my studies, what's going to happen to my graduation, what's going to happen to my co-op. And so when you, again, in that high stress level, it's hard to be able to observe those thoughts and choose what to engage in because you're feeling so overwhelmed. So this becomes a very practical way of dealing with it when you take that step back, when you do the grounding techniques, when you do the breathing, and then observe what emotions are you experiencing in the moment without fully engaging in them. It's not easy. We're not saying it's an easy thing
No,
to
it's
do.
not easy, but we never recommend stuff to people because it's easy, but because it's beneficial. So practicing mindfulness just buy us that time that we need between stimuli and our response to the stimuli. So this is what we want to develop. This is what we want to master. So emotions originate in our body. So we have body signals. So if we learn to pay attention to that, we will know that we are about to get frustrated.
So paying attention to the body cues. So everybody responds
Body
to.
cues,
So
yeah.
let's take that example of the emotion of frustration. So we want to mindfully observe, and this is very individual because everybody's going to respond, like we said, differently to the emotion of frustration. So doing a body scan or observing, let's say, how you respond to frustration could be that your heart rate is starting to go up. You notice that you're getting more tense, so your muscles are tense. You notice you're getting warmer, perhaps. You notice you're tensing your jaws here. You notice that you're not smiling, right? That you're frowning, perhaps. So that's part of the tension in your face. You notice there's tension here. So perhaps there's a little bit of pain or a headache starting. And again, there could be pacing, could be that you're speaking up more. The opposite could be that you become very quiet, right, with your frustrations.
Exactly. There are lots of signs. We just need to pay attention to them because
Exactly.
they usually go unnoticed. So body scan is a very good practice to try in mindfulness because it gives you indications about signals in your body that usually you do not notice. So if you feel tension and your jaw is very tight, but usually you don't know that, you don't notice that.
And so one of the first strategies, and this leads to this next question, is how can a student practice mindfulness with student stressors? I know we just finished our exams, finishing up with that. So hopefully the stressors have gone down, but in general, how can a student practice mindfulness with typical student stressors?
So when you talk about typical student stressors, what do you have in mind?
So student stressors could be assignments, could be financial issues, could be issues at home, could be issues friends at school, perhaps feeling lonely or overwhelmed with social connections or a lack of social connections. Could be issue with a supervisor or a professor, could be issues with work while working at school, could be their health.
Yeah.
So yeah, grades.
There
One
are lots that students present. There are lots of problems that students present with. So when we recommend mindfulness, the recommendation of mindfulness practice is intended to reduce stress and not to add unnecessary stress. So I think our attitude towards that is very important. Yeah. So if we think of all of these problems that we talked about, the problems that students present with when they seek support, we can see how mindfulness can be helpful to make sense of those problems, maybe to understand how to help themselves to relate to those problems, because not all the problems have a practical solution. Yeah, but sometimes we can change how we feel by how we relate to what happens to in our lives. You know? So I think it's very important to engage in the practice of mindfulness with a positive attitude. To keep in mind that mindfulness is something that you gift yourself with. It's not something that takes away your time and energy.
It's supposed to give you energy to deal.
It gives you energy to deal with all the problems you might know or not about.
Exactly. Yeah. So another question is how to be more consistent in mindfulness practice, especially in the world new world, so to speak, that we're living in now, where we've had to adjust to not going to work physically, not going to campus or classes physically, and practicing, I like to call it physical distancing, not social distancing, because I still encourage the social interactions, but being physically apart, of course, right? So how can we practice this given this new world that we're trying to adjust to, which we're slowly, I'd say, we're in a good place of adjustment now. We figured out how to work from home. We figured out how to study and work, do schoolwork, and even do exams from home. And we're trying to figure out how to continue the social connections with people. So how can we be more consistent in this mindfulness practice?
Well, consistency is key in mindfulness. You know, so as I said, there is not substitute for practice in mindfulness. But the good news is that we can practice formal or informal mindfulness. So there are many myths about what mindfulness is. So I think people might have those misunderstandings about mindfulness is and find it harder than in fact is. You know, so when we talk about practicing mindfulness, we can do it formally or informally. So the formal practice of mindfulness includes an intentional commitment of time that can be anywhere from few minutes in a day to 1 hour long. Yeah, it depends how advanced you are in your practice. So we can talk about some examples of formal mindfulness practices. Sitting meditation, you just sit or stand upright and practice noticing your thoughts, emotions, and sensations with a curious, open, compassionate awareness. And that's a formal mindfulness practice. Awareness of breath, it's another formal mindfulness practice. And it's something very easy to do because we always breathe. As long as we are alive, we breathe. So we always have our breath with us. So just using the breath as an anchor to come back over and over again. So another, go ahead. You have a question?
No, I was just saying, and I use this with my clients sometimes, just to bring a bit of humor. Say you are breathing, aren't you? You breathe to live.
Yeah.
So perhaps you can use breathing in a different way by being consciously aware of how you breathe, especially when you are stressed. But when you're doing mindfulness practices, how to breathe in a way to slow down your heart rate, to release the tension in the muscles, with the example that we used earlier with frustrations. Yeah. So I just always throw that in. You're breathing anyways. Why don't you try to learn to breathe in a fully conscious, aware way?
Yeah. Bring awareness to your breath because you do have that breath. The fact is you are not aware of it because you don't make any effort to breathe.
Exactly.
So So another example of how to practice a form of mindfulness is eating. Yeah, so this is what I use with my clients a lot. So not surprisingly at all, when I ask them how you eat, they would say, well, on my couch, in front of TV, screening on my phone, searching my phone, and so on. So I do invite them to try to eat mindfully, just focusing maybe on one piece of food and experience that with all of five senses. What is the texture? What is the taste of your food? What is the colors that you have in your plate? And eat the food very slowly and see if it makes a difference. And you know what? Sometimes they come back and they say, yeah, it did make a difference. I want to try it more. I want to disengage from my phone and TV.
And especially when you are eating, because we do tend to get caught up, especially now, because perhaps there are students still living on their own, they're away from their families, or they're engaging more with their devices while eating,
And
while
we
that.
encourage that because this is how we stay socially connected now,
And it's such a beautiful way of being able to slow down is when you are even preparing your food, is observing how it feels, the smell of it, the scent as you are preparing it, imagining what it's going to taste like, whatever you mix the spices and the herbs and the condiments. And then when you finally have it all in front of you, to really look at your food again, when you put it in your mouth, to observe the taste and the flavors. And yeah, I know this is something right now as somebody who's practicing fasting. We definitely have a different appreciation of food during the day. And especially when we're preparing it, there's a zest for it. There's an enjoyment in it. And I would say that's a form of mindfulness. And definitely when we eat it, there's a different, so the first few days when I was starting to fast this month, I noticed that the taste of the food was different. And that's because, again, I brought my awareness and attention to that. So that's something just a little bit of a side note in terms of mindfulness, in terms of preparing food and eating it. It's because you are holding off from certain aspects during the day, that it's sort of like when you don't have a sense, the other senses are heightened. So definitely at the time when we're eating, our senses are heightened in terms of the awareness of the food and the flavors and the taste. But this is something that we encourage to do daily in our mindfulness practice, especially when it comes to food preparation and eating it. So it's just an interesting note as you were talking that reminded me of that. Yeah.
Yeah. So and it's easy to do because either you buy or prepare your own food, you eat. Yeah, and you eat at least once a day. This is not the healthiest model, but you still need to eat as an individual. So just remind yourself to try to do it mindfully next time when you have a meal in front of you. So another formal practice is body scan that we already talked about. So just slowly and intentionally scanning your body with your mind focusing from the top of your head to the tips of your toes and see what you feel in your body. So as I said, those are ideas of formal mindfulness practices, but don't worry about it, because you asked the question was how can a student, practice mindfulness with so many stressors in their lives. So if you don't have time to practice, to have formal meditations, or practices, you can always practice informally. So when we talk about practice mindfulness in a more informal way, we notice our experience from moment to moment and bring our attention to one thing as many times as we can throughout the day. And basically anything that we do during a day can be done in a more mindful way. If we wash the dishes, for instance, this is something that we don't really pay attention to. So just slow down the process and notice the water and feel the sensation of the warmth on your hands. If you brush your teeth, again, this is such an automatic behavior that we do not pay attention to it. So next time when you brush your teeth tonight or tomorrow morning, just slow down the process, and try to feel the taste of your toothpaste, and the sensation when you brush your teeth on your mouth. So
that's an interesting thing to observe, is when you're brushing your teeth, how to clean. I know I definitely, before I go to bed, I try to make sure I get all those places smooth. But I guess that's a form of mindfulness too, is running your tongue along your teeth to
You
see
can
if,
counterfeit.
yeah,
Mhm.
yeah. So there's so many different ways of doing that. That's an interesting, even brushing your teeth, you can be mindful of that.
Yeah, anything you can think about, you can do it mindfully or in a more mindful way. You know? So another one that I really like is listening. Practice your mindful listening. So just listen deeply to people in your life with an open heart and mind. Don't listen to respond. You know, just give the person in front of you, the space to talk, and refrain yourself from giving any advice. Yeah, and
That's
let
a hard one. That's a hard one because people are really quick to jump in with their advice and their ideas, but that's not being an active listener. An active listener is to listen without jumping in, without judgment as well.
and that's why people come to counseling, because people in their lives are not very useful. When they, with all good intentions, they want to help, they jump in to offer a solution because they want the suffering to go away. But this is not, as you said, active listening. So, we have formal and informal practices. We just need to keep going and do not use, a day going with no practice, as an excuse to give up practice
Mhm.
altogether. Just
Distinct.
move from where you love and keep going.
That's an interesting way of looking at it. If you don't do it for one day, that's almost an excuse for giving up. Yeah. And any skill that you want to build is something that needs to be practiced daily and regularly. Again, what happens here from a biological neurobiological perspective is the brain is developing the neural pathways to a specific habit, I mean hobby.
Yeah.
I'm not saying yeah, like a habit or a routine or a skill or a thought, whatever it is that you are practicing, the brain is developing the neural pathways to strengthen it, just like any other muscle. So the more you practice this, the more the brain becomes familiar with it, strengthens the neural pathways to become a strengthened skill. So the day that you don't do it, obviously you're missing out on it. Just like when we talk about healthy eating, healthy sleeping habits, healthy exercise, just some form of exercise. So if you're not doing these things regularly, the body, the brain, your whole system will be out of touch with that practice, and it'll be almost like somewhat starting over again. But the muscle has memory, so when you get back into it, don't worry about it. It will recognize it.
Exactly. Don't shame yourself. Don't, just forgive yourself and start over again. You are gonna feel it. If you are deep into the practice, you are gonna feel it, but you'll pick up again. Yeah,
Yeah,
just
and
just keep going. Yeah, don't become too discouraged to try again.
that's the amazing part as a human beings, is we have the resilience and the memory to pick up on things that we leave for a while. So again, not giving up, just going back to it. Your body, your brain will recognize that and keep going with that. Yeah. So another question is how to compartmentalize emotions. Do you have any tips and tricks on how to do that? This is one question that was sent in.
Was a question. Well, I think it's important to clarify why somebody understands by to box up their emotions. Yeah? Because sometimes what happens when emotions are very intense, we just don't deal with them. We suppress our emotions, we put them aside to never get back to them. And that's not a good strategy, because emotions have a life and they find an outlet.
Mhm.
So I think what is important to develop this ability is to become capable to separate uh, by learning how to sit with your emotions until they dissipate. So this is one thing that probably people who become overwhelmed with their emotions, they don't know. They don't know that emotions are coming and go. They don't last. Mhm. So we can do that by, just imagining that we have boxes, separate boxes for different emotions, and we only open one box at a time with a plan to when to get back to which. So another technique that I usually
Well,
suggest to students is worry time. I don't know if you do that.
worry time.
Worry time, yeah. So just, twice a day for 10 to 15 minutes, focus on the problem that you have with focus and intention. If you need to set up an alarm, then do it. But after 10 or 15 minutes, you are done and you return to the task at hand.
Right.
And of course, your mind will wander. Of course, your mind will take you to the problem again. But you can just remind yourself that is not your worry time. And come back, bring your mind back nicely and gently to the task that you have. Maybe it's an assignment, and maybe you need to study for an exam.
Yeah, yeah. I use a similar technique, also the box technique, where put whatever issue you have in that box, put that box on the shelf, focus on what you need to do and get done right in the moment. And perhaps at the end of the day or later on, you can come back to the box and see if you need to engage with it, see if you need to do anything. And the idea here is to acknowledge. When you acknowledge the emotion or the thought that is bothering you, instead of blocking it, blocking, because what's going to happen is going to come back and hit you harder. But so if you not block it, unblock it, and say, I get you, I see you. I kind of sometimes liken that to the little child that's constantly like, mama, mama, yeah, mama, mama, and then you're like, what? And the child's like, I love you. And the idea here is the child just wanted that attention. Same thing with these insistent thoughts or worries or troubles or emotions. They want your attention and acknowledgement. So if you give that acknowledgement, right, just like that kid who said, I love you, and just walked off because they got the attention they wanted. Again, giving that attention to the thought, saying, I see you, I acknowledge you, I validate you, I get you. But right now, I really need to finish this assignment. Right now, I need to get to work. Right now, I need to exercise, whatever the task is. Putting it in the box, closing it, putting it on the shelf, say, I will come back to you later. And chances are when you come back to it later, you don't have the need to engage with it anymore because you've given it the validation and the acknowledgement and the attention in the moment. So I find that's very effective. And that's just a little side thing to what you're saying, being able to compartmentalize and putting things aside and being able to engage in them perhaps later, or perhaps recognizing within yourself, no need to engage with it because you've already given it the attention earlier.
It's very important to make the distinction between not dealing with our emotions because we are too afraid of,
Yes.
and just put them aside because it's not the right time to just come back to them later on to deal with, to acknowledge and validate.
Right.
And another technique is to just journal about our emotions and thoughts. This is how you give them life. How you give them acknowledgement and validation. Some people find that very useful.
Yeah, it's so powerful. Acknowledgement, normalizing a situation, validating. It is incredibly powerful. And of course, we know this as therapists, as counselors rather, in session with our clients, is when they come to us with a problem that perhaps they've spoken about many times with friends and family, and they're not getting what they need out of them, and coming to a session where they're seeing an objective third-party person listening to the issue. Just that validation sometimes of, that really sounded difficult. Sounds like you're dealing with a lot. Hearing that from somebody who has nothing to do with your issue can go a long way in helping, just being heard and listened to and being acknowledged. That it's so powerful. I find it, seeing that with my clients. What do you think about that, Magda?
It's very powerful, and after people feel validated, then they can translate that for themselves in their own lives, and they leave your office and master that ability to self-validate, because this is what we want them. I always say to my clients, my goal is to become useless. So you do for yourself what you find is beneficial in our encounter.
It's very powerful. Our job is to be useless for you later. Not validating our position here. That's okay. We get it. We and I joke with my clients too sometimes, is I hope not to see you.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then they stand there for a second, huh? Oh, yes, that makes sense.
That makes sense.
So another question we have is, and this is specific, excuse me, how to use mindfulness to work through a breakup of a relationship, a marriage.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
This is a very specific question indeed.
Yes.
So with the population that we work at this stage, we can see that a lot. People are coming in our offices with this problem a lot. I just went through a breakup. I feel devastated. So of course, breakups, unless you are the one who terminated the relationship and you feel relieved finally. A breakup comes with a lot of emotional pain, and naturally as human beings, we have a tendency to seek pleasant emotions and run away from unpleasant emotions.
Of course, the flight or fight response. Yes.
Of course, yeah. So when we go through a breakup, we find that we are in our heads a lot and we ruminate a lot. And we might find asking ourselves, why wasn't I a better partner? Or saying stuff like, if I only was more perceptive of my partner needs, or I was selfish to not think about them, and stuff like that. We also find ourselves being probably anxious about and pessimistic about the future. Yeah, like I am never gonna be in another relationship again. Yeah,
I
or
can
I
never
will
get over
never
this.
find somebody like the person I just lost.
Yes, of course. Yes.
So we can help ourselves to the practice of mindfulness to just become, as we already discussed, the observer of our thoughts, and to recognize that our thoughts are not necessarily true just because they originate in our minds. So we
That's a
can
big one.
recognize thoughts and treat as what they are, just thoughts, and avoid being caught up in them. So when we become aware of our thoughts, when we bring awareness to our thoughts, we create space for our thoughts, and we can consciously decide to disengage from our thoughts.
Disengaging. Can
Yeah.
you describe that, please?
Sorry.
Can you describe disengage?
Yeah, so we also call it cognitive
Re-
distance. Yeah, cognitive distance. So we recognize that we have some thoughts, but we do not allow our thoughts to to take off. Yeah, it's just the thought. It might be true, and most of the time it's not. Yeah, I might have the thought that I'm stupid, I just lost, or it's all my fault that I just ended this relationship, but that is not necessarily true.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So, and besides thoughts, we also have lots and lots of emotions when we go through a breakup. And it's a big loss. And losses. There are layers to our loss. Yeah, there are so many losses. It's not only the fact that we lost the partner, but we lost probably some mutual friends. We lost some opportunities. What could have
Routines,
been
the
like,
past
and it's not
routines, the phone
anymore.
calls or the connection or doing like the companionship,
The
lost perhaps of
companionship.
plans for the future. I hear that a lot from clients who said, this was the person I was going to spend the rest of my life with. This is the person I was going to have children with. This is the person I was going to build that house with the white picket fences, right? And all of a sudden that dream is gone. That's very painful to think that you feel lost. Well, this was the plan. What's the plan now? That person is gone, so the plan is gone. There's a form of grieving here involved in a breakup as well.
So we
Even
can
if the
use
person still
mindfulness
alive.
to acknowledge that, to bring awareness that we are grieving, and to attend to our emotional pain and nurture our emotional pain and offer compassion to ourselves because we are going through a moment of suffering. So instead of, beating ourselves up and questioning our abilities to be in a relationship, just to acknowledge that it hurts to terminate a relationship that
Yeah.
we valued so much.
Exactly. Yeah. Well, thank you so much for sharing your thoughts around that. Another question is how to use mindfulness strategies and not burden others when dealing, for example, either with a breakup or other difficult personal struggles.
Mm-hmm. Well, this is a question that we clearly hear a lot in our offices. So first and foremost, I want to stress that I suggest if you have family or friends that you can talk to, then use them. you know so I always hear that I don't want to burden anybody with my own issues.
Yeah.
But having social support and being able to talk about your problems is crucial on how you cope with your issues. So again, if you have family and friends that you feel connected with and you trust them that they are good listeners, then use them. However, there are situations, and I think you see more as an international student counselor. There are situations when people do not have a support network, or their support network is miles away, and they cannot access them when they need them. So family and friends that they just deal with their own struggles at the moment. So in that case, I think mindfulness practice can come handy, and we can use it to identify the problem and our emotional response to the problem, because not the problem per se is an issue, but how we respond emotionally to it. So our initial reaction to what happens is called primary emotion. I think we all heard about that. And those primary emotions are very strong feelings that come in quickly through our senses and do not involve thinking about what's happening. However, those primary emotions open the door to what we call secondary emotions. So let's say we hear that a lot in sessions, like I feel sad and then I feel angry because I still feel sad even though I come to therapy and I take my medication. So yes. So that that second round of emotions become more problematic than the first ones. Or I feel I did something, I responded in a way to my child's needs or to my partner's needs, and then I feel guilty about that. And guilt is what I stand with and what troubles me. So I think through mindfulness, by bringing awareness to our emotions, we just learn to quickly recognize our first round of emotions in distressing situations. Instead of, being angry because I'm sad, just naming the emotions that we first feel. I am sad. I feel sadness. And research shows over and over again that just
He just came over, so I just grabbed him.
just naming your emotion helps to regulate your emotions and reduces the intensity of your emotions. Mm-hmm. Just putting a name to it, sadness, frustration, anger, whatever you feel and is your primary emotions. And it's not easy to identify the first round of emotions, but we can do that in mindfulness.
And that's very powerful through, again, this medium to be able to practice that compartmentalize, but not like using the supports around you, but also recognizing that not everybody will have the ability to listen to that or provide advice, or maybe too much for them given what's going on in their lives as well. So being able to do that on our own is very powerful. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So another question is how to ground self when you feel that you're slipping into a depressive episode or suicidal thought. So this is pretty specific. So how to ground yourself when that feeling comes that you're slipping into that space.
Okay. So when you feel depressed, so when somebody feels depressed, they are not in their window of tolerance. So we use the term window of tolerance to describe our optimal zone of arousal where we can function the most effectively. So if we are not in our window of tolerance, if we are emotionally dysregulated, we are either hyper aroused and we experience anxiety, or we are hyper aroused when we are depressed. So somebody who experiences stress, chronic stress and depression, they are in the stage of being hyper aroused. They feel unmotivated, they feel sad all the time, and they also might have suicidal thoughts because the life is not worth living anymore. So to bring ourselves back in the window of tolerance when we function the best, we need to use grounding skills. And we think about grounding skills as like life preservers. We use them to quickly orient the person, to orient self in the here and now. So there are very simple techniques like just take deep breaths and extend your exhale, release gripped hands, counting backwards.
Yeah.
Feel the feet on the ground. Just orient and name objects in your room. Listen to soothing music, or just maybe call somebody that you trust.
Very simple, but effective
Very
and powerful.
simple and very powerful in the moment, because when somebody has suicidal thoughts, the bottom line is safety.
Exactly.
So people can just make a plan for themselves. And, there are so many grounding techniques. We don't necessarily need to use them all. Just use few that make sense for each individual. So
It's personal.
if you find, it's very personal. If you find that you are somebody who occasionally experiences suicidal thoughts, you can make a safety plan for yourself. Who to call? What kind of music is soothing for yourself?
Exactly.
Where to go for a short walk?
Yeah. And I find that when you distract yourself with counting backwards or noticing your breathing, your thoughts shift away, right? So changing is where you are is very powerful as well, definitely. So another question is, so this is a general one, tips on mindfulness, especially during the pandemic.
Okay, so I would say that, mindfulness has some qualities, some attributes, and I would like to talk about two of them. One is patience. So through this pandemic, we can really use the time to become a bit more patient, because we know that it's a pandemic, but we don't know what is gonna end. Yeah. So through this pandemic, we were forced to slow down.
Yes.
Because we usually live we are quite used and adjusted to move fast, to have multiple commitments, and to just check things off on a list. So what mindfulness teaches us is to bring awareness, take things one at a time, and to slow down. So I would really encourage people to take this time to master this quality of mindfulness, of becoming more patient. And
it makes sense that we are forced to slow down, so we need to think about things differently.
And maybe we didn't want that, we didn't ask for it, but because it is here with us, maybe we can take advantage of it. And another quality of that mindfulness comes with, and maybe we can try to master it during this time, is the non-striving attitude. So most of our life is is spent by doing things
And rushing from one place and one thing to the next. At
a very fast pace. So we define ourselves mostly through what we do.
Exactly.
Through mindfulness, we learn to move from doing to being. Just being here, just acknowledging that we are here with our emotions that might be unpleasant at time in the environment that we live in right now, but to just be in the moment, to liberate ourselves from an agenda.
And I find Eckhart Tolle, who's the guru for this well-known practice of being in the present, not in the past, not in the future, but really living in the present. And if now's perhaps a good time to follow some of the strategies. His book, A New World, is that what it's called? I forget the top of my head. But he also has a lot of resources online that you can see. He's got his own social media as well, where he talks about these practices. And he came out with this really effective video right at the beginning of the pandemic, where he talked about living in the present rather than the future and in the past, and how to cope with the pandemic by being aware of your emotions and living in the present, and not putting so much energy in what's going to happen next, because that a lot of negative energy is involved there.
A lot of negative energy, and we really don't know what is going to happen. So worrying so much about the future, we do that just because we try to bring more control and to predict the future, but it's really not in our power to do so.
Absolutely.
And
And
you know, when I indicate to students that to live in the present moment, they would resist by saying, "But I need to think about the future. I need to think. I am a student. I need to think about my career and what I'm gonna do." And I do agree with them. But the fact is that planning our future is not worrying and being concerned about our future. You know, so of course we plan our future. That's why we go to school. That's why we wake up in the morning and go to work, yeah, because we are planning our future. But planning our future is not the same with worrying about our future. It's not the same going to school every day with thinking what I'm gonna do with my degree 4 years down the road.
exactly. Yeah. Thank you so much for doing that. We have two non-related mindfulness questions that could be related, just therapy or counseling type of questions. So, and we're heading to the end of our live right now. So we'll end off with these two questions. And by the way, those who are watching, please do join in with asking questions as well. These are wonderful questions that people have sent us throughout the week, but we're happy to hear whatever questions that you have in regards to what we're discussing today. So this question says, I find it difficult to talk about my problems. I'm scared to try a therapist. What would be your advice on that, Magda?
Well, I think, you know, she wrote she emailed the question to you. You know, so I think whatever the person is, he or she or them, they emailed the question. I think they already made the first step. You know,
Exactly.
by
Yeah.
acknowledging, you know, I find it difficult. This is my emotion. I am scared to try a therapist. You know?
Yes.
And here it comes handy what we call self-compassion. And when we talk about self-care and self-compassion, we talk about what we need. Yeah, so I do understand that your emotions invited you to run away. Yeah, because what you can do when you are so afraid to try something new, as talking to a counselor, yeah,
And
your
I
emotions
noticed,
will
I
say,
noticed
"Go away, yeah, run as fast as you can, yeah." But
and I noticed this,
self-compassion,
Magda. You're
yeah,
doing this, as you're speaking, you're doing this, I notice.
yeah.
And it's almost giving comfort and safety.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
ask yourself, is this what we need? If I run away, you know, I will have my need met. Mm. And
Yeah.
self-compassion really means to acknowledge what you need and give yourself what you need, even though what you need is not exactly what you want in the moment. Mm.
Right.
So just acknowledge the emotion that you are scared. You know, validate your emotion. Mm. Maybe there is reason. There is good reason for you to be scared of that. You know,
Yeah.
maybe in the past you didn't have a good experience. Maybe you didn't have anybody to ever listen to you, and so on.
Exactly.
And try to give yourself what you need. Not run away from emotion, but roll with your emotion and come to see a counselor.
So that you can talk about your feelings of being scared of seeing a counselor. That's okay.
And maybe not talk at the beginning. That's okay. We can provide a safe space for you to just be there, even though you don't feel like talking at the beginning.
Absolutely. I recall years ago, I had a client who just needed that quiet space to sit with someone who gave
Mhm.
compassionate energy. We barely spoke with that throughout the session, but they needed that quiet space, living in a busy house, living in a busy environment with school and work. They just wanted a quiet space with someone to give them that compassion. Yeah. And so we can definitely provide that for you.
It's
And
fine. Yeah,
we can do that
that's what
virtually.
you asked
We
for. Yeah.
we can do that virtually too now. So for Carleton University students, we are still open for the summer. We are open, but we are doing things virtually. So if you do have the need to speak with a counselor with what's happening in your life right now as a registered student, absolutely just call our main office number, 613, excuse me, 5, let's see if I remember this correctly, 520-6670. And you can easily access our website as well, carleton.ca/health. And once you go in there, all the information is there, how to connect with a physician as well as a counselor as well. So the last question says, how do we stop feeling sorry for ourselves? Sometimes I feel, sorry, I feel like it's me against the world.
Mhm. It makes me laugh because you know what? Sometimes it's correct. sometimes the feeling of you against the world is so correct.
Yes, yes.
Life is hard, life happens to you, life is not easy to deal with, and you might have that feeling that it's just you against the world. Yeah. So coming from a self-compassion approach to therapy, I think what is important is to, when people are coming to talk to us, is to normalize that feeling, that it's only normal to feel that way. And it's not just you that feel that way. We all do, you know,
Yeah.
we all do at times, depending on what we live through, what life throws at us in at different times. So, and the question is, how do we stop feeling sorry for ourselves? Well, you don't need to stop feeling sorry for yourself. Maybe you just replace feeling sorry for yourself with showing compassion to yourself, understanding that there is a moment of suffering. Yeah. And pain comes from suffering comes from pain and resistance. I do go through this. This is what's going on in my life, X and Z and Y and Z. But I don't want that to happen. And I know I have no control over, but I still don't want them to happen to me.
Yeah. Yeah.
So maybe instead of, knowledge, there are so many things that I need to deal with right now. It's a very difficult moment in my life with everything that happens to me. And I might not change too much, but I change how I look at things, and I take a proactive approach. I do something to change, perhaps, and I change what I can change, and I change how I relate to what I cannot change.
Can you repeat that last part? I relate.
I change how I relate to what I don't have power over.
I relate. So I change
There
to
are
what
things that you can.
I relate.
There are things that you can influence,
Yeah.
and change, and there are others that you have no power over. But the ultimate freedom that you have is how you look at them.
Absolutely. Perception is everything. How you choose to look at a problem, how you choose to reframe it. If you continue looking at it from a negative point of view, it's going to continue that way. And in fact, probably get worse and worse, because the more you engage with negative thoughts, the more it will make you feel heavy and burdened. But if you try to look at and reframe, change to, what is another way of looking at this? What is another option to this problem? What are other ways, ABC? You're lightening up the load right there, and that can enable you to look at the problem in a different way. So I tend to look at problems, and this is something I use a lot in therapy with clients and students, is when a problem comes your way, reframe it to an opportunity.
Yeah, it's an opportunity. And, it's not like, transforming the negative into positive, because sometimes it's just not the case. Yeah.
Not possible.
But acknowledging there is a problem, but I am also resourceful and resilient. Yes. And I know that from my past, when I have encountered similar problems and I've dealt with them just well.
That gives a lot of compassion and strength and encouragement and empowerment to yourself, is that when you say that I'm not given a problem more than I cannot handle. And this is very spiritual as well. Like you are given an issue or a problem, but if you can learn how to reframe and change that, but to also acknowledge, what, I've been through something before. And we always say that in therapy to clients. We remind them, how did you get through this issue? What were some strategies? What has worked? What hasn't? What can we do now? And recognizing that you do have the ability and the resources. Coming to a therapist or a counselor is accessing resources available to you. And there's so much more resources online as well these days. As Carleton students, outside of the work hours as well, you have access to free counseling as well. So being able to recognize that you are resourceful, you have the ability, that lifts up the load.
Not to neglect the inner resources. Yeah, you have internal resources,
not just external.
When people are coming and say, I've been through this, to this, to this, yeah, and they say, and what does it mean that you are sitting down today with me in this office and talk to me? It means that you survived, It means that you survived and you dealt with all of these issues in your life.
And to remind yourselves, I really like how you reminded that it's not just the external resources that you can access, but you've been through this, you got through this, you were able to do this. That's very lifting and empowering. Thank you so much, Magda. I really appreciate, and all of us appreciate, your time and your thoughts and your knowledge that you shared about mindfulness. What would be a last thing that you'd like to end on?
Thank you for sending the questions. Thank you for organizing and facilitating this. I know you had the help of Nicole. Hi, Nicole. Nicole is our colleague.
Yes, Nicole has also helped in the Carleton University official page and all the student services, whether it's CUSA, ISSO, all the other student groups. Thank you so much for sharing. And we're going to continue developing virtual workshops and engagements like this to get our students engaged, and even people outside of the university setting, that you're more than welcome to access these resources. So you can go back to the CU Health Promotion page. There's resources there, different videos as well. And so we're going to try and keep up doing this kind of thing. And any student out there who, a Carleton University student who feels the need to speak with a counselor, please don't hesitate. Contact our office at 613-520-6674, and the receptionist there will direct you as needed where you need to go. So again, thank you so much, Magda. I benefited as well with reminders and new things as well. It's amazing when you look at a topic that you are somewhat familiar with, as part of our work, but then when somebody else presents it, you get an opportunity to look at it in a different way and reminded of things. Yeah.
Okay, thank you so much again.
Thank you so much. Thank you again. I'm just going to slowly try and end things off here. So thank you again. Take care. Bye.